Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Mr. Robot Season 3, Episode 1, Power Saver Mode. This video is part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Mr. Robot. So I have to start with a spoiler warning for Mr. Robot up to Season 3, Episode 1. If you haven't seen up to the Season 3 premiere, you will not want to watch this video, otherwise some things will be spoiled for you. So, I actually quite like this episode, and it has me feeling a lot better about Mr. Robot as a whole. Now, apparently, with Season 2, a lot of people hated it, and apparently, I would say, like, most of the mainstream has jumped off the Mr. Robot train. It had a lot of popularity after Season 1, but now a lot of people, like, after Season 2, quit the show and saying it's turned to shit. And this is reflected in the critical reviews and, like, the, award season, because Season 1 got nominated for Best Show in both. I think it won the Golden Globes. It didn't win the Emmys, but actor Rami Malek won Best Actor for the Emmys. And then for Season 2, it got completely snubbed. No major awards whatsoever, and that's reflecting the sort of popular response that Season 2 was no good. Now, me myself, I liked Season 2, but not as much as some others. However, I didn't hate it as much as all the critics and mainstream seemed to. I actually thought it was a pretty good season. But looking back on Season 2 as a whole, and I reviewed it a little bit recently for preparation for Season 3, and I was actually shocked of how little it pushes the story forward. And that is the main issue I had with Season 2. In fact, I would say plot-wise, the amount of that it does to push the story forward, this whole season could have been done in 6 or even 5 episodes instead of 12. And in fact, when you watch the previously on for this episode, most of the previously on consist of Season 1 scenes, because basically that's what you need to know. Season 2 actually did very little to push the story forward, and instead it was seemed obsessed with going on these pointless sort of side stories of having like a 80s sitcom, or having the pull the wool under for you. Oh, he's really in jail the whole time, when none of this actually does that much to push the story forward. And so I was actually I do get the impression, though, especially from this episode, that the writers have seen this and they're going to try to address that and not go so much off the rails and be a bit more direct in Season 3. And I think they had the setup for this. And the fact that Season 3 has 10 episodes instead of 12 does make me feel better. It does make me feel like, okay, they are going to get more down to business and get into more concise storytelling. Now, getting into this episode in particular, it makes me feel good because it does, even though it doesn't give too much away, which it shouldn't, because we still have apparently until Season 5, so they still need to pace the story out slowly. They can't give away everything at once, but pacing the story out better than they did in Season 2, which was too slow. For this episode in particular, I think they're doing a good job of that, because we do get some hints at what the bigger picture might be of some of these mysteries, but it doesn't tell us outright. It just hints at it, and this could be misdirection, and I love that, and I think it's great. So this episode actually has me feeling really good about Season 3. So now let me get into more of the specifics of the episode, because we start with this thing seeing White Rose at the power plant. We actually get to see this infamous Washington Township power plant we've heard so much about, where Elliot and Angela's parents died at, and the first thing we're opened with is with a tour guide talking about parallel universes. Now, this could be misdirection. This could just be thrown in there to sort of throw you off or whatever, but it does get me wondering, because then you get White Rose contemplating. Now, we know that White Rose has this big plan, this big master plan that apparently won Angela over so completely at the end of last season, and that power plant in specific is very integral to his plan. In fact, we've seen him haggling with Price and Price could tell that there was something about this power plant that was important. Now, some people last year had thrown out the theory of time travel. And I can't remember exactly what I said to this, but I'm pretty sure I was pretty dismissive about this theory. Like, yeah, that's ridiculous, time travel. This show's not going to do something like that. But after this episode, I'm thinking time travel, to be perfectly honest. Because it wasn't just the opening scene, but towards the end of the episode where Angela is talking about why she had changed sides so much and was so devoted to White Rose now. And she talked about how basically she thinks that, pretty much saying that she thinks that everything can be undone. And that's what she sort of hints at to Elliot. She asks him, what if there was a way to undo everything that happened? So that makes me think time travel. But not... I should specify, like, not time travel is I'm going to travel back in time and change the past. I don't think it necessarily needs to be that. It could be more of time manipulation rather than actually traveling back into the past, but doing something that will alter the timeline and maybe create, I guess, a parallel universe, and getting more into parallel universes, or maybe bring that universe, because they talked about, and the tour guy was talking about how parallel universes could be actually really connected. So maybe they're talking about pushing this universe into another parallel universe and combining it somehow and making it so these events never happen, or something like that. So I think that's the direction they're going in. Something that has to do with time manipulation, parallel universe. But again, this could all be complete and total misdirection on the show parts, and I think there'd be nothing wrong with that either. Maybe it has nothing to do with time travel, parallel universe, and there's something more grounded in reality. And I think some people might have an issue with the show going so much straight into the science fiction realm, because it never really, up to this point, it never dealt with anything so science fiction-y as parallel universes or time travel. But me personally, I'd be fine with that. So it has me really curious, really interested to see where things go. And I know I don't expect to get any big answers soon. In fact, I'd be surprised if we get them this season. In fact, I almost don't want to because I know I want them to pace the story out great, but I don't know. It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting either way. So it does have me really curious about to see what they're going to do with this. Now, getting more into Elliot's storyline, it's interesting because he got shot, and I don't think anyone, there was a couple people online, I think, who were trying to play off, oh, he spoiled it by saying he's going to be in the next season. Come on. Who really thought Elliot died at the end of season 2? Of course he didn't. So he survived, and he was getting healed by Angela. I was confused at first of why Angela didn't outright say that she was working with the Dark Army when Elliot woke up, but that was made clear later on, which I'll get to later. But it was interesting that Elliot just immediately just got up and left. He didn't care that he just got shot. And I like how when he first woke up, he thought, oh, I'm alive, so that means it was just a dream. That means that the Tyrell wasn't really real, until Angela said, oh no, Tyrell, I talked to him. And she's like, fuck, it was all real. It's not, and more than that, he said, I lost my power. Because at the end of season 2, when he was going into raid, he was trying to take the power back from Mr. Robot and saying, I acknowledge this is all an illusion, but then learning it's not all an illusion, he's like, fuck, I really do have no power. Which is a very interesting dynamic here. And so then he goes to Darlene. He goes to his apartment and he finds someone there, and it's Darlene, and she's freaking out. And I like this interaction between them. It shows that their brother-sister relationship isn't as strong as it could be, because she's right that he's not really as worried about her and what happened to her as he should be, and he's not. And it's kind of frustrating to me as a viewer that he wasn't as forthcoming with what happened to him and how he outright lied about Tyrell being involved. But I wonder if he knows that she's working with the FBI, because to us, the audience who saw the end of season 2 where Darlene was with the Piru, it's pretty damn obvious that she's working with the FBI, especially But they make note about like how she keeps looking at the van. So it's almost like Elliot knows that she was noticing the FBI, but maybe he thinks that she just noticed them, that she's not aware that she's actively working with them, which is pretty goddamn obvious that she is. So this is going to set up an interesting dynamic for the two of them going forward. And so they try to, Elliot successfully closes this back door, which could potentially fuck up their plans, but Angela doesn't seem that concerned about it. So that was pretty interesting. And it's interesting that Darlene, I don't know if she was is because of the FBI manipulation. I think outright she's against this whole thing. And she was, of course, pissed off at the idea that Elliot had been deceiving her the whole time and had this bigger plan in mind. And it's interesting that she doesn't know about Mr. Robot yet, but Angela does. And in fact, she knew that he was having hallucinations about their dead father, so it seems like Elliot should have went the whole distance and explained to her that it was a split sort of personality, because at the moment she thinks that it was Elliot who is, did all these plans in the first place. And it does frustrate me that they're not communicating more, but that is in keeping with Elliot's character, who's not very good at communication. So anyway, then we get the scene where Elliot meets Irving, and I'll get to Irving shortly. And after that, he just tells him right out, shut down the whole thing. Don't want to do it. And he's like, okay, fine. White Rose says that she wants to listen to you, and you're the architect, so you're the boss. We'll shut it down. And so we get this really interesting scene with Elliot, like these internal monologues. And again, this show is always amazing at production value. This episode is no different. Amazing editing sequences, cinematography, everything is just spot on. But we get this scene with Elliot's monologue, and he's thinking about how his attitude about fuck society has actually done just that. It's fucked society over and messed everything up, and he's realizing the error of his ways and how he's like completely wrong and fucked up, and doing the whole 5-9 hack has actually made things a lot worse, and a lot of people in power to take even more power. And it's interesting that he gets this revelation. However, as the audience, this is something that is not new. It's like a no shit Elliot. I mean, this is something that they drilled into the audience head in season 2, which had, again, season 2 much longer than it needed to be, and they kept repeating this point over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, that the 5-9 hack actually made things worse, not better. And so that's like a no duh. So it seems to be coming a bit late. Elliot's coming a bit late to this revelation that, we as the audience had drilled into our heads a year ago. And to be fair, Elliot was in prison for the majority of season 2, so I guess it makes kind of sense that he's just now realizing this. But it's a bit frustrating as an audience watching that he's finally coming to realize something we knew forever ago. But it was an interesting sequence, and I want to get back to a theory I had in season 2, because at the end of season 2, episode 9, which was my favorite episode of season 2, where Elliot's relationship with Mr. Robot was acting really weird. Elliot was popping up, apparently, when Mr. Robot didn't expect him to. And so I had this theory that Mr. Robot was losing his control over Elliot, and Elliot was gaining control, and a lot of that had to do with him coming at peace with himself. His talks with Krista, and being in prison, and then going out and talking to his mother, who was apparently in a paralyzed condition, but he was forgave her, and so it seemed like he was making peace with himself. So basically, he's getting well. He's becoming better mental health wise, and that is what in Mr. Robot's basically an effect of his mental instability. So when he's becoming more mentally healthy, it's diminishing Mr. Robot's power or his control over Elliot. And I'm still totally, completely sticking to that theory. I think that theory is great. But with this scene in particular, what I think this scene is telling us is that he's completely lost now, is that he's losing his mental health. He's becoming unhealthy again because he's realizing how badly he fucked things up and how fucked up everything is. So when I was watching this scene, I was thinking, well, this is going to actually make Mr. Robot stronger because he's becoming more mentally unstable. Even though, ironically, he's becoming mentally unstable because he realized his Mr. Robot's position is even worse and his whole position about fuck society. So, mentally he's actually going even further from Mr. Robot. But I think the fact that he's just becoming more mental unstable in general is going to make Mr. Robot stronger. Or at least that's my thinking on this. I could be totally wrong about this, but, that's just my thinking on it. But now, let me get to the new character, Irving, because I think this character is great. I absolutely love this character. Like, I think when I first heard, they're introducing this new character in season 3, I'm like, do we really need another new character? But he's played by an actor who apparently is well known from a bunch of other shows that I never watched, so I never seen him before. But he was great, and I love his introduction at the Red Bell. It was very similar to DePiro's introduction in season 2, except less long-winded and actually made sense, where DePiro's introduction seemed like, what the hell was the point of that scene? Why was it even there? And she didn't actually do anything meaningful until like several episodes later. Whereas here they get right to the point, even in the scene itself. And I love, I think I've worked customer service before, and I fucking hate customers like this. It makes, just dickheads. It's the fucking rules of the restaurant. Just deal with it and go with it. So I was totally taking the clerk side, but I did think I loved the scene because it presented him. It showed what kind of character he had. It showed his personality and that he was the type of person that was like, it's the principle behind. And the fact he was making such a big deal about it. But what I love more about it is how calm he is. Like, he reminds me a bit of Harvey Keitel's character from Pulp Fiction, Mr. Wolf, who would just come in, cool everything down, fix everything up, wrap it, and he was even more calm than that. It's like, it seemed like this guy never gets upset. This guy never stresses out over anything. And it was just so great. And especially the way he was in line ordering the food and he just talked on the phone and just very calmly, oh, is he still alive? And you can gather that he's talking to Tyrell, and Tyrell's freaking out. Even though you don't hear Tyrell side of the conversation, you can tell he's yelling, freaking out, oh my god, I killed Elliot. And he's just as calm as he can be, being like, oh, is he dead? Oh, well, maybe you shouldn't do that. And he's just saying stuff about talking about people dying right in front of this clerk who's just like, what? It just shows, like, I love this character. And then we get further interactions with him when he goes to Tyrell. And again, he's perfectly calm. Elliot's like bleeding on the floor. He could be dead, and he never like freaks out. He's just like, oh, I wouldn't really press on his stomach. That's probably not helping. I mean, I don't know. It's just such a great character. And then, of course, getting his interactions with Elliot and Darlene was also golden, and the way he just very calmly disables the FBI's car. It also shows that he's also sort of another hacking sort of genius. So it's interesting that we get this other sort of, because he's obviously working with the Dark Army, yet he's not Chinese, first of all, so they're definitely outsourcing. Of course, we also had Cisco, who wasn't Chinese, but he seemed more on the outs. Like this guy Irving, he seems like he's more higher up, I would guess, than Cisco, and he's closer to White Rose and sort of knows what's going on more a bit. So I think that's really interesting. I love that they're expanding upon the Dark Army even more about this, and that the new character that we got is directly involved with the Dark Army. So that's good. But he doesn't know about Mr. Robot, apparently, because we get to talking with him and Angela, and he's like, why the hell was Elliot acting like he didn't know me? Like he was acting like he never seen me before. So it's interesting. I wonder if he will find out about Mr. Robot because of that, because he does seem like a very smart guy. So this sets up for a very interesting storyline for season 3. So I absolutely love what they're doing with this character. But speaking of Angela, let's let's go ahead and jump more into her, because I was actually thrown off a bit at first too, because I actually thought I took her at her word. Like, I knew she was, like, we knew from the end of season 2 that she was on White Rose's side. But what we saw at the start of this episode had me questioning that a little bit. But it turns out that that's all just an act, a facade she was putting on for Elliot. And I think it was absolutely beautiful, because it was interesting, because I didn't realize this. When Elliot asked, oh, can you watch me and make sure I don't turn into him, Mr. Robot, basically. And she said yes, but he's not aware that she's actually playing him, because she wants him to turn into Mr. Robot, because she wants him to, she wants White Rose's mission to go forward, so, and that's what Mr. Robot wants. And she's against what Elliot is doing to try to stop it, but I love how she never outright tells him not to, never outright says it. Like, she tried to sort of hint at, hey, we can make things better, but when she see that, you know, we can undo everything that happened, but when she see that line of thinking wasn't going anywhere, she just gave up on it. And so it seems like she's basically playing him. And Elliot came up with this plan to go to E Corp, and he wanted her to get him a job at E Corp. And it seems like she's going to do it just to placate him, to keep him occupied, to keep his attention elsewhere, so he doesn't fuck with their plans. But I have a feeling that Elliot is going to end up fucking with their plans anyway, and end up getting up to some shit that they can't foresee by him going to E Corp. So that, again, is setting up for an interesting storyline. But, of course, the most interesting thing with Angela is when you see Christian Slater, and he's like, hello, so you know it's Mr. Robot, but she instantly can tell. Well, not instantly. She has to have him step closer to and she reveals later it's because he looks directly at her. And this was an interesting acting difference, and this is probably something they've actually been doing from the very beginning, is that Christian Slater always looks at people directly, never looks away, whereas Elliot's more very antisocial, always looks down, always looks to the side. So it's interesting that she was able to tell the difference between them because of that in particular. And getting their interactions was also great. I love how she was like, when Mr. Robot tried to talk to her, she's like, don't talk to me, we're not friends, I'm friends with Elliot. And that had them concerned. And it seemed like she was she's contradicting herself, I'll say it this way, because she said to Mr. Robot, we're not friends, so it seems like she's acknowledging that Mr. Robot and Elliot are two different people. But then when Mr. Robot asks, well, how can you justify deceiving Elliot? And she's like, how can you say I'm deceiving him? I'm looking right at him. But that contradicts, because that's implying that Mr. Robot and Elliot are the same person, and that contradicts what she said earlier about we're not friends to Mr. Robot, which acknowledges that they are in fact different people, if you know what I'm saying. So I think her saying that is more of a self-justification, a weak one, and maybe she's going to realize it's a weak one, and she's going to have to deal with the fact that she is deceiving her best friend. So that's another interesting thing to play out. But talking a bit about Mr. Robot, I love when they met. I love the scene when they met Tyrell. And Tyrell, of course, is very fragile. He's like, oh my God, I shot you. I'm so sorry. And he, Mr. Robot being his typical, Christian Slater self. And it's like, he's like, oh, but you're such a shit marksman. You didn't even hit any vital organs. And he just like tapped him and was like, I'm just messing with you to break the ice. I mean, that's so, I can actually imagine these words coming from Elliot. Because of course everyone else is seeing Elliot. And I can imagine him saying stuff like this. So I absolutely love that. And I do like the editing where Mr. Robot's talking to Angela, and Angela says, oh, I'm looking at Elliot right now. We see Elliot sitting next to her, so we can see from her perspective of what she sees Elliot. And I love that. And I think they should do that a lot more, actually, to let the audience, including the audience, know that they're not actually seeing Christian Slater. And of course, I think this is one of the rare, I wouldn't say the first time, but it's one of the rare times where we actually get some Mr. Robot scenes without Elliot. Because usually the show will play where we see it entirely from Elliot's perspective. So when Mr. Robot takes over, we don't see that. We just see the aftermath, and Elliot has no idea what happened and what he was up to. So it's great we're getting a bit more into that. I think the only real scene that we got that was like that was Mr. Robot without Elliot, was from season 1, when we see Christian Slater talking to Tyrell. And at the time, we didn't know that Mr. Robot and Elliot were the same person. I think that's pretty much the only scene we got like that. And even season 2, we got the scene over again, and we actually saw Elliot there. So we saw it from Tyrell's perspective. So this is like, I think that was the only time they showed us a Mr. Robot without Elliot being there. And so now we're seeing more of what Mr. Robot's up to when Elliot's blacked out, when he's completely gone, so to speak. So that's interesting. I love that. I think that is great. Doing a lot to push the story forward. That and the whole dropping hints about time travel and stuff being undone makes me very optimistic for season 3. But that being said, this is the first episode, and they tend to go all out and be a bit better with the first episode. It's the middle of the season where I'm going to get weary, because if it goes from here and they start having a bunch of filler episodes like they did in season 2, where it's just not disseminating any information, just going off on these tangents that don't need to exist, that could potentially happen to make season 3 bad. But I'm crossing my fingers that that's not going to happen, and that they're going to stay on track and tell a great story, because I think they definitely have the potential to do that. So my rating for Power Saver Mode out of 10, I'm going to give this a 9. Excellent. I think this is an amazing start to the season. It sets up a lot of interesting storylines going forward. It introduces an amazing character of Irving. It takes giant leaps by like dropping hints of time travel, and also exploring Mr. Robot when Elliot's not around, and Angela's sort of motivation. So I think this is a great episode. Maybe not one of the best. That's why I wasn't willing to give it a 10. But definitely a good start to the season. So that's it for my review of Power Saver Mode. Be sure to check back here every week as I continue to review episodes of Mr. Robot, and be sure to check out my channel as I cover many other shows like Star Trek, Game of Thrones, Discovery, The Expanse, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.